This webinar is called What is a Bob? Why do we need them? What are they? When do we call them? And how on earth does the conductor know how to do that? We're going to start off by looking at lead of plain hunt doubles. It's 10 changes long. The extent of doubles, factorial 5, is 120 changes. So 10 changes of plain hunt doesn't create our extent. It doesn't come close. We need to do something different. And what we do is we introduce a different change at the end. Instead of the change that crosses 2 bells there, 2 bells there to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we leave the bell in seconds place where it is. We leave the bell in fifths place where it is, and we cross those two. And that gives us the row 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. If we then repeat that 3 times, see our 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, we get back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've created 40 rows and a method called plain bob doubles. That's still not enough. The extent is 120. So we need to do something different again. You see there, we've got our first different change for plain hunt, which was our plain lead of plain bob, with third, the bell in seconds place staying where it is, the bell in fifths place staying where it is, and the other two crossing. And what we do is we introduce this different change, which is called a bob. The bob differs because the bell in fourths place stays where it is, the bell in fifths place stays where it is, and these two cross. 3 bells, compared with this, have ended up in a different position to what they expected. Bob has affected the order of 3 bells. That's quite important. If we take our first whole course of plain bob doubles, I've cut the middle section out to save space. If we take our first course, and then right at the end of the course, we call a bob. Instead of 1, 2, 4, 3, 5 becoming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if it was a plain lead, the bob has changed the order of 3 bells and caused the lead end to be 1, 4, 2, 3, 5. If we then ring another course of plain bob doubles and another bob, we'll bring up 1, 3, 4, 2, 5. Then another course, a third bob, gets us back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bob has rotated 3 bells, do that 3 times, and it comes round. And that gives us our 120. So by introducing one different change, we managed to get to a lead of plain bob. 4 leads of plain bob gave us a course of plain bob, and introducing another change tripled it to become 120. Let's have a look at Grancer doubles. The plain course of Grancer doubles is 30 rows, not 40. We can't actually get to 120 changes just using bobs, and we're going to have to introduce a different call, and it's called a single. A single changes the order of 2 bells rather than 3. We'll have a look in detail a bit later on at what those calls look like in Grancer doubles. But essentially, in these 2 simple methods, we can't get the extent without calls. And that leads us on to our summary. If we want to use simple methods to ring so that we can learn them easily and ring them easily, we need calls to get us to be able to ring more rows and indeed extents. Bobs and singles are 2 different types of call. What calls also do is they enrich the ringing experience. They enable us to ring different touches, enhancing our practice night. We're now going to move on to what. What are these 2 types of call in different methods? Now remember, a bob is a call that changes 3 bells. A single is a call that swaps 2 bells. And what we'll see is the effect of calls, different methods, is different. Let's look first of all at plain bob doubles. And here we have our lead end, the first lead end with a bob called. We don't need singles in plain bob doubles, as we've already established. Bobs will do the trick. First of all, look at the bell that's about to make seconds. The bob is called, it doesn't make seconds, it runs out. The next lead, it makes seconds instead. Look at the bell that's about to dodge 3/4 down. The second in this instance, in blue. When it comes down to 3/4, the bob is called. Instead of doing that dodge, it runs in and does the 3/4 dodge next time. Look at the bell here that's about to dodge 3/4 up. It makes fourths at the bob, bringing 2 blows in the same place, and goes back in, hunts back to the front, and then the next lead, it does 4 blows behind. Finally, look at the bell that is doing 4 blows behind when the bob is called. That bell doesn't do anything different, and it's going to dodge 3/4 up the next time. Let's have a look at Grancer doubles. Grancer doubles is slightly more complicated in that we have bobs and singles. Bobs alone weren't enough. What we see also is that the bob is called slightly earlier and it takes effect slightly earlier. So let's have a look at the bell that was going to make thirds at the lead end. It still does at the bob. That bell is unaffected. Have a look now at the bell that was going to dodge 4/5 up. It's the fourth one coloured in light blue. Instead of going up to 4/5, the bob is called and it makes an early thirds and goes into the hunt. Now have a look at the bell that's in the hunt. When the bob is called, this bell double dodges 4/5 down, comes out of the hunt. Finally, look at the bell that would have dodged 4/5 down. It dodges straight away at the bob, which means it dodges twice in 4/5 up with the bell that's coming out of the hunt. So 2 bells are double dodging 4/5 at the bob, and 2 different bells are making thirds. One wasn't expecting to, and the other was going to do it anyway. Now let's have a look at the single. Now, first thing to look at is that 2 bells do the same thing at a single as they did at a bob. The bell that was in the hunt double dodges 4/5 down, comes out of the hunt, and this bell that was going to go round to 4/5 down double dodges 4/5 up, just like as in the bob. Now, the ones that are different, the bell that was going to, this one here, the bell that was going to be unaffected, it was going to make thirds, makes seconds at the single, leads again, and goes into the hunt. So lead, seconds at the single, lead, has gone into the hunt. And this bell, the one that would have gone up to 4/5 up, does 4 blows in thirds, and that's backstroke, handstroke, backstroke, handstroke, and in. Slight difference then, if you look back at the bob in Grancer, you'll see that 2 different bells made thirds. In the single, 1 bell makes long thirds. So what that's essentially done is it's swapped 4 and 5 over compared with the bob. It swapped 2 bells, as a single always does. Now we can move on to plain bob minor. There are similarities here to our plain bob doubles. Let's have a look at the plain lead. Bell makes seconds over the treble. 2 bells dodge in 3/4, 2 bells dodge in 5/6. And what happens at the bob is that the bell that was going to make seconds doesn't make seconds, but runs out, and it will make seconds next time. The bell that was going to dodge 3/4 down, this is the one marked purple, doesn't do the dodge 3/4, misses it out. We say it runs in, and it will do that next time instead. The trickier one is the bell that was going to dodge 3/4 up, marked orange in this diagram. Instead of dodging 3/4 up, it does 2 blows in fourths place, then goes back in. That bell will actually do 5/6 down next time. two bells in 5/6 dodging together aren't affected by all this. Now let's just see how the single is different. Bell makes seconds, unaffected, just like plain course. Two bells in 5/6 dodge together, unaffected. The bells in 3/4, instead of dodging, changing position, they make places over each other. Effectively, they've swapped compared with what they'd have done in a plain lead. So the bob has changed the order of 3 bells, what they're expecting to do. The single has changed 2 bells from what they're expecting to do. This gives detail of what each bell does in each particular instance in bob minor, both in the bob and in the single, and you can review that at your leisure. That's reproduced in many a textbook. Let's have a look at Stedman doubles. Stedman doubles plain course is 60 changes long. In order to give 120 rows and the extent, what we do is we introduce a single swapping a pair of bells, and 2 singles 60 changes apart will give us an extent. What the single does to the line is actually quite complicated. So let's have a look. The single affects the 2 bells that are double dodging in 4/5 together. The bell that's already in 4/5, so it's done a double dodge 4/5 up and is about to do double dodge 4/5 down, does a piece of work which is often called coat hangers. After it's lied, it will do a blow in 4th place, point 4ths, back to 5ths for 2 blows, another blow in 4ths, back to 5ths again, then carries on doing its double dodge 4/5 down. The other bell fits around that. So the bell that's come off the front comes up to point 5ths, makes 4ths at the single, point 5ths again, and then back in, going back in the same way it came out. And that's why they're called cat's ears. Just to look at the detail then, you can review this. Key thing, go in the same way as you came out, whichever one of these two you're doing, and just see how these fit together. Let me move on to Stedman triples. Unfortunately, the singles are not the same. The calls are not the same. It's one of the only methods where the calls, when you ring it on a different number of bells, is actually different. Looking at the normal situation of Stedman triples, that's the work in 4/5, 6/7 at the end of a 6. What happens at a bob is that the bell that's been doing double dodge 4/5 up makes 5ths and double dodges 4/5 down. The bell that is dodging at the back, 2 bells, they do a double dodge together, then another dodge, and another 2 dodges. So essentially they've added 3 dodges. With a single, the bell in 4/5 does the same thing, makes 5ths, turns round, double dodge 4/5 down. At a single, one of the bells is unaffected, so the bell doing double dodge 6/7 up is unaffected, makes 7ths, double dodges 6/7 down. The other bell though, the bell that's been in 6/7 waiting, will have done double dodge 6/7 up, double dodge 6/7 down, makes 6ths at the single over the bell that's making 5ths, and then goes back. So it'll do double dodge 6/7 up, lie, double dodge 6/7 down. I'm now going to look at Cambridge minor. Now, even if this is beyond your comfort zone now, what you should learn here is a bit of universality about what bobs do. We're going to have a look at the first lead end, the bottom of the first column, and we're just going to look at when the treble is leading and what happens. The bell in 2nd place stays where it is. The bells in 3rd and 4th place cross. The bells in 5th and 6th place cross. What happens at the bob up here on the right is, if you just focus in on these 2 rows when the treble is leading, Bells in 2-3 crossover. Bell makes fourths. 2 bells in 5-6 are unaffected. That should seem familiar. That's the same as what we saw in plain Bob minor. The approach is more complicated, and what happens next is more complicated. But these 2 rows, when the treble's leading, are the same. Similarly, at the single, 2 bells, bell making second stays where it is. Bells that were dodging in 3-4 make places around each other, and the 2 bells in 5-6 dodge. Exactly the same as the single in plain Bob minor. I want to compare the calls in Cambridge minor with the calls in London minor, generally considered to be a much more difficult surprise minor method with wrong hunting around the lead end. First glance, these bobs and singles look very different between the Cambridge and the London. Very different shape to the lines. However, let's focus just at what is happening when the treble is leading. Look at the treble lead in Bob minor. Treble leads, bell makes fourths, bells in 2-3 cross, the bells in 5-6 cross. Similarly with the single, bell makes seconds, bell makes thirds, bell makes fourths. Now the fact that the rows before and after are a very different structure means that the line looks quite different to the call, but fundamentally what is happening at this call is the same. This is called a fourths place bob, because fourths is made, and that's different to what would normally happen. Now let's just see about how this translates to 8 bells instead. And the good news is, it doesn't get more complicated. The fourths place bob is still made in fourths. Bells in 2-3 cross, and the bells above are not affected. Same with the single, same in London major. They're all the same. You could see that minor is more difficult. 60% of the bells, of the working bells, are affected by a call, plain Bob minor. In the Cambridge minor, 6% of the working bells. In major, it's less than 50%. So that summarizes what? There are 2 types of call. There's the bob, which changes 3 bells from where they'd normally have expected to be, and a single that changes 2 bells from what they would normally be. And what we also see there is that bobs and singles can feel quite different in different methods, especially when you're starting out in method ringing. Now we're going to look at when. When does the bob caller say bob or single? In plain Bob minor, in this example, you'll see that the bob is called in the penultimate row before the treble leads. That's the backstroke. So the bob is called a backstroke. The bob takes effect at this backstroke, the backstroke of the lead, 2 blows later. Now you might wonder why you can't say the bob during the handstroke. Well, essentially, you just got to give the bells a little bit more notice, because they might have started pulling, expecting to do the dodge, and then they'd have to abort. So basically, you say the call to give everybody enough notice about what to do over the next 2 rows. Grancer doubles, as we saw earlier, is slightly different. The bob affects the bells 1 row earlier, just before the lead end, and so our call is made when the treble is in thirds place at handstroke. That's 1 blow earlier. And finally, how? How on earth does the bob caller or conductor know when to make the call? And there are essentially 6 ways of doing this. The first one is what you'll have done first if you've learned to call plain Bob doubles. You learn a pattern relative to your own bell. So for instance, you may call them bobs so that you run in at the first one, out at the second one, and make the first one. And that actually rotates. You can call yourself to run out, then to make, then to run in, or to make the first bob, run in at the second bob, and run out at the third bob. But essentially, you're learning a pattern of calls relative to what you do, and you don't have to worry about anyone else. Another method of knowing a touch is to learn a repeating pattern. And here's an example of a repeating pattern that works for both plain bob doubles and plain bob minor. Plain lead, bob lead, repeated 3 times. So plain, bob, plain, bob, plain, bob. 6 leads that will come round. Any pattern actually will come round. Might not be true. You might not know how long it is, but calling a repeating pattern is a safe bet. Third way of doing it is to learn a pattern, but relative to another bell. This is a degree more complicated than the first one because you have to watch someone else. The easiest thing to do potentially in bob doubles is to call one bell observation. So you look to see when one bell is making 4 blows behind. And you may, especially at first, translate that to what you're doing yourself. But calling the pattern relative to another bell is a third way of doing it. A fourth way of doing it is to learn the number of leads between calls and count. So for instance, to call a touch of plain bob minor, you might remember 1414, and that would mean you put a bob in after 1 lead, a bob 4 leads later, then another bob 1 lead later, and finally a bob 4 leads later. This doesn't give you a lot of information about what's actually happening with these bobs, but it does work. And you will see that written out in lists of touches, and you'll see it particularly listed out in touches of Sire triples, for instance. The fifth one is to learn relative to fixed calling positions, and this is the more advanced way of doing it, particularly used in quarter peals and peals. And we have calling positions, which are typically when the tenor or the 6th in minor, 8th in major are unaffected. W stands for wrong, which is 5/6 up in minor. H stands for home, which is 5/6 down in minor. And that touch would be said wrong home, wrong home. So you're calling a bob when the tenor is in the wrong position, then the home position, then the wrong position, then the home position. That's actually the same as the one above. But basically, that's a more abstracted way of learning a touch and much more efficient. And the last one, and you will get there in the end, is to make it up as you go along. Experienced conductors will be able to tell what position the bells are in. They'll be able to work out what combination of calls will get us back to rounds. It's typically used when dealing with inexperienced bands and wanting to do something different. And so, in conclusion, we've looked at why we need calls. We've looked at what calls do, particularly the bob and the single. We've looked at when you call bobs. And we've looked at a few ways in which bob caller or conductor knows how to do it. I hope that's been helpful, and you're looking forward to ringing lots and lots of touches and maybe calling them yourself.